Hi. So just a little bit about myself. I grew up in Chinchilla, came down here and went to university. I've effectively been an accountant for 30 years. I grew up on a farm. I was a practicing Catholic. So yeah, it's a little bit about myself. But in the 30 years that I've worked in finance, can I say that I've never actually seen freedom measured as a KPI? I've never actually seen it used as collateral for a bank loan. I've never seen it used as a currency. Interestingly enough, my view of the Bible was that it was a set of rules and regulations so that we would all conform in society, so that we would raise the standard of living. And if we had a comfortable standard of living, we would then, within that framework, be relatively free. So I'm a big believer in saying our freedom is actually the child of affluence. And it's not something we're born, it's not a right, it's not something that's a gift, it's something we have to earn through responsibilities first. And we hear that today, and it's, I can remember when I grew up, you had responsibilities to get rights, and somewhere along the way that's just seemed to pass away now, and everyone just thinks they've got a right to this, but we never hear any more about the responsibility to earn those rights. So freedom doesn't come easy. And to be quite frank, I'll be quite honest with you, I'm not sure that society or man has ever been free. I don't think the caveman was ever, like man today, was ever free from hunger. I don't think he's ever free from thirst. I don't think he was ever free from the threat of his fellow man or his fellow tribe. We always live under the sword of Damocles. I'm not sure if any of you know about Damocles' sword, but there's always that threat that, you're going to lose your throne one day. So we always have to be on guard, and we always have to be, in my view, in control of our surroundings. And that is the best way then to build a defence, to then give us the power to exert free will to do what we want. Now, we hear a lot about free speech, and as I just said, I can't define the word freedom, but I do know what I believe in, and that is speech, because that is the most powerful tool or weapon, if you want to call it that man has in order to get what he wants. We use speech to educate our children. We use speech to influence our fellow man. We use speech to basically write a trail of, we started writing things down. And as we saw, once man started recording things and memorising things, society started to pick up, and our wealth and everything picked up from that. I think it's very, very important that we use speech to teach children to think for themselves, and we teach them to stand on their own 2 feet, because we're always going to be subject to attacks on free speech. We're always going to have people wanting some of what we've got. So that's in a nutshell, I suppose, my view on speech. But if I could just use an example, if you look around the room right now, can you tell me, and I just want to talk about how the left or the big government use this to, brainwash us and influence. Can you tell me how many people in this room are wearing a blue jumper? Let's see if you can count it all up. Okay, have you worked it out? Doesn't have to be exact. Now tell me who's got purple, who's wearing a purple top. No, done it straight away. So it's interesting, if you go into the newsagents in the morning and you look at the Australian and then you look at the Sydney Morning Herald, there'll always be 2 different issues. The Australian will be about the budget, defence and infrastructure. The Sydney Morning Herald will be about refugees and Nauru, about underspending on health and education, about some victimhood. So 2 different worlds. I've read that Daniel Andrews has got people in the crowd at the AFL looking out for people who use hate speech. Meanwhile, Sudanese gangs are, say, for example, running around and not being arrested, and they're not recording those arrests. So it's I like to use that as an example of how you can use the speech to control the reality. But if we want to maintain, our freedoms or the power to do what we want and maintain that standard of living, we need to control the language. It goes without saying, in my view, that 18C is just unenforceable on a fair and equitable basis, as, might I add, is much of the law, because it's written in jargonistic words. And that's another point, and a very important point, when it comes to speech. You've got to actually be able to write laws that are not only fair, but enforceable. So how can you tell who's going to take offence? How can you enforce that? My background in particular, I've also got a Masters of Tax Law and I've done international tax structuring. One of the things I want to change if I get into Parliament is the concept of arm's length transactions. That's how we determine whether or not when multinationals ship profits offshore, if we go how much we're going to tax, it's all based on this notion of arm's length. But tell me this, what's arm's length? What's this suit worth? $550, $500. In a court of law, you'll never be able to determine what arm's length is. If you go back to the Mabo decision in the High Court when it was finally decided, I think it was a 4-3 outcome. Well, how is it in the highest court in the land, the 7 judges couldn't agree on something? So, it's about being precise as well. So when we write laws and all those things, we've got to be smart about how we do it. By the way, with the withholding tax example, I'll tell you how I want to be precise. We currently have a company tax rate in this country of 30 cents. If you make money in this country, it's corporations. If you ship it offshore via what I call above the line profits, interest, royalties and rent, your withholding tax rate on that will probably be between 0 and 10%. So there is a direct incentive for multinationals to ship their profits offshore. Yep. Do you know how you fix it? You do what Ireland and Singapore do. Right. They have a company tax rate of 12% and a withholding tax rate of 15%. So you can track the investment in, but if they want to take the profits from our resources and our bases offshore, they'll pay a high rate of tax. That's just something that's actually what I really want to run. Because what I'm afraid of is that we will lose control of our children. And one of the reasons why I'm running is because of the gratitude I have towards our forefathers, and I want to return that favour to our children. It's interesting, you're taught when you grow up, you read these bedtime stories, once upon a time, such and such and such, and then happily ever after. But we don't seem to do that anymore. We always seem to fight and argue amongst ourselves. And it's a good example. Like if I got that bloke up there, just drank that cup of coffee, to come up, walk up here. Okay. So it's very easy. Like I've just asked this guy who I've known for less than a month just to come up here. I want you to go back. Right?
I'm a lefty, mate.
Doesn't want to do it. And that's, so when we use speech, I think that, the best way to win the argument in politics is to actually have a vision, is to be rational, and is to, there was something else I've forgotten as well, and be specific. Because at the end of the day, we've got to win the argument in politics. So I would say we've got to stop fighting amongst ourselves so we can focus on the true enemy. But if we want to get somewhere in politics, we've got to win the argument. It's not about freedom. It's about winning the argument to gain the power so that we can get people in power who have the same values as us. So thanks for taking the time to listen to me. Cheers.